The Call of Duty Black Ops 4 season reveal was everything the Call of Duty fans wanted and then some, regarding the juicy changes that were rumored for weeks. Of course, from newly announced formats to prize pool changes, the reveal was jam-packed with information. And of course, I thought it was only right to give my pal Tunn a call to help cover everything that was talked about during the reveal. How are you recovering after yesterday, buddy?
I'm just about there. I think I've processed everything.
I know, right?
There was a lot to sort of divulge, and I'm sure we'll touch on most of it.
Yeah, it was an experience. I gotta say, like, there was like one topic, and I was like, okay, that's gonna be it. And then there was just another, and I've spent the entire day trying to basically dissect absolutely everything that occurred. But let's go and start off though with the most important subject leading into the reveal: 5v5. It's officially in the books. It's coming to Call of Duty. Quickly, before anything else, give me your initial thoughts on seeing 5v5 and COD mix now.
I just didn't see it coming, Lando. I didn't see it coming. No, I
After
did.
all the Reddit posts, YouTube videos,
everybody knew it was going to happen. So, I mean, just the confirmation was good. I think overall, yes, we've seen some negativity. You know, I'd previously sort of talked about it, whereas I was struggling to really come up with too many positives. But overall, it's quite nice to see the community be sort of mostly positive about it. Everyone seems to be taking it from a standpoint of it's a nice refresh, it's something new, it might inject a little bit more life into it. Overall, I'm fairly happy it's finally out there so players can start getting sorted. I would have liked to have known a little bit earlier. I'm sure that some organizations and teams would have liked to know a little bit earlier as well. But overall, I'm happy about it, and I'm excited to see what it's going to be like, because realistically, we don't know until the game's out, until we've had proper hands-on play. We don't know what it's going to be like.
Yeah, I feel like for me, the biggest negative is basically from the organization's point of view, the quick turnaround that they're going to have. And then also, you know, we could obviously dive into money another time, but is it worth it from the org's point of view? Of course, I believe they go from 4.2 million exactly last year now to 6 million. Of course, you got to add in the 5v5 factor now, along with how much of the amateur scene could affect that overall prize pool as well. But that to me is the only thing that could really be a strong issue. And then obviously the current issue now is the organization's quick turnaround. How do they make these changes in such a short amount of time? But I think as far as positives are considered, because at the initial beginning of 5v5 being announced, Tunn, I was totally against it. I was like, no, this isn't a good idea. But slowly over time, it started to make more sense. And like, granted, regardless of the quick turnover rate, I'm kind of excited about it. I think this helps. This helps advertise competitive to the public side quite a bit. Regardless of what people think, I actually think that is going to help in some way. And I feel like a lot of people have said, oh, the viewership, it's not going to come from there. Regardless, I think it's at least a nice thing that you're going to have public, for the most part, match what we see in competitive today.
Exactly, and I think that was one of the things that they really touched on a lot when they were discussing 5v5. We had them say we want to bridge the gap. Right. It will do that in a sense. It definitely will. Whether I mean, I don't know, because I think the thing is, when we're competitive players, we don't look at it from a public player aspect who doesn't know anything about it. We don't look at it from somebody who's been used to playing 6v6 and looking at these guys and say, well, why do you play with two less people on each team? And, you know, it's hard for us to sort of think in that mindset because we've never really been there. We've just known 4v4 forever. What I will say, and is I think this applies to a couple of other changes that we may well see, is that Treyarch have always sort of been very, very good. If big changes come in, they've been good at implementing them. I think, last night I discussed with Brycey that there was times when, in the beginning of Black Ops 2, David Vonderhaar was like, okay, so we're going to bring score streaks in, and me included, everyone was like, oh my God, no, we do not want score streaks. And it turns out not really be that bad. You know, it's one of them things where it's just become a different aspect of the competitive scene in Call of Duty. Now, 5v5 coming in, albeit it's different to having score streaks, of course, but it's something different coming in. It's a Treyarch game. They're good at implementing new things. If any developer was going to do it, and we wanted any developer to do it, it would have been Treyarch. So, I mean, there's that positive I think you can take from it, that we trust them. We trust them a lot.
Exactly. And I think, too, to kind of go along the lines of like, hey, like they can change things over time and they probably know what they're talking about, is how people have been reacting to the game mode side as well. Like, you know, they're saying Hardpoint's going to play a lot or way too fast. How is CTF going to even play out? I think for the most part, the only argument could be made about Hardpoint. But to me, I think a lot of those discussions could also be halted by the factor of saying, hey, respawn timers are a thing. They could change up spawns. Like, depending, we don't even know how the maps are supposed to play. They're meant for 5v5 as well. And then also you bring up the discussion about search and destroy. I think that's going to play a lot slower. That seems to really be the non-negative for the community. Search and destroy doesn't really seem to be much of a factor. And then we also got to discuss control, right? That's a new game mode that's definitely out there. I think, at least in my opinion, that's one they're going to try out and see how it works. But that's meant for 5v5. That's meant for the maps given. That's the game mode that Treyarch has introduced. And if I were to remember one particular game mode that was introduced, the last Black Ops title that was on the ground by Treyarch, Hardpoint was there as well. So I don't know. I think they have a pretty good run with game modes like this.
They have. And I think I want to sort of semi-disagree with you on one point. That I think CTF is probably going to be the game mode affected the worst by the 5v5 change. I think it's going to become a lot slower, and we already know that CTF can be slow. I know it's a new fast game that's coming up with an extra man on the field from each team. It's going to make pulling flags a lot more difficult. So I think for me, I like to see CTF go. If any of the game modes are to be moved out for, probably control, if it's going to be anything, as you said, then I would like to see CTF go. A hardpoint, yes, okay, the engagements will be up, but you'd be right. There's respawns that can be put in a little bit just to slow it down a little bit, where you potentially could see that need to happen in 5v5 scenario. But one of the things I picked up on is that they hadn't got a rule set yet because they wanted to discuss it with the pros and they wanted to do some play testing before they have a definitive rule set, which is good. I don't want to hear anything announced too soon before people have had their hands on. I think it's good that they're going to wait a little bit longer just to make sure that they've got it locked down. And obviously I know there'll be discussions going backwards and forwards because I'm sure Treyarch would love us to include everything in the game, but I don't think that's going to happen. I was a big advocate of what Calista said in the off season to say that, okay, why don't we try it? But I think there is a couple of things that cannot stay. Well, in their current state anyway. I mean, I'm sure we can discuss that at another point when the rules do come out. But at the same time, I think that they've started at the right point. They have time for pros to get their hands on the game and give an opinion before the rule set is actually put in place.
Absolutely. I'm not going to lie. Hardpoint, search and destroy, control. Give it to me. It's what I want, at least for right now. During the offseason, I think that's what a lot of people are kind of directing toward. But of course, one major thing to go along with 5v5 is that the CWL has officially removed roster region locks, which to maybe the outside community, to maybe guys who aren't as familiar with Call of Duty Esports, maybe you're not familiar with this exactly. For those who maybe aren't, this basically means that players are no longer tied to one specific region, and it allows for players to compete in whatever region that they like, which now means international squads can form. That kind of gives the green light for players in different regions to come over to NA, for Australian players to come over to EU or NA, etc. But whenever I heard this, Tunn, it to me cemented the 5v5 topic rather, from earlier. It allows for better all-around competition when you have access to go wherever you like for talent. I'm not going to lie. I think this is a good decision. I think this is something that had to be implemented, though, with 5v5 in consideration, because we talked about, I think it was Bryce who actually mentioned on your guys' podcast, he was saying there are now, 16 more spots available, and those are 16 spots that should go wherever. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't be based off region. It should be based off who is the best player and who should get that spot. I think region, obviously this being unlocked is a great thing.
Yeah, and I've already heard some very juicy intel, which I can't divulge of something happening.
Tunn, you can't do it.
I can't say.
You can't tease them like that.
I was told in trust, and I can't say anything, but it's gonna shock a lot of people when it happens. If it still happens, of course. Whoever I spoke to could be blowing smoke up my backside, but at the same time, I think it's going to be crazy, and I think it's going to. I think you're right to say that these 16 new players that are going to be introduced. I mean, whether they be older players or either way, it's 16 more players. They can be from any region at this point. It doesn't necessarily have to be leaning towards one region. Although I do believe that it'll probably still stay with North America being the more dominant region, with the EU kicking up at the top there somewhere, but. I think it's a really good thing. Bryce made that point, and he was very, very right. The more pros we have, the better. It's more players on a salary. It's more players getting exposure. It's more players being able to do their thing on the main stage. It's more players to talk about. It's good on every single level. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see possibly some new names coming up. We might. We've got this tournament, and I'm sure we'll discuss how the Pro League format is working and how you get into the Pro League. But I think that's going to be great, that tournament where there's going to be, 28 teams? No, 32 teams going into it. And there's going to be names there that you haven't really heard of. You've heard little bits of to see how they do when they get into potentially get into the Pro League. And I think it's just going to be good. New blood's always a good thing. I think we'll see that from America, from Europe. We've already seen Mindfreak have announced a new player. Name has completely escaped me, but he's just turned 18, and they're bigging him up as well. New players coming in every single year. We've got more of them now because there's just generally more players. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure.
For sure. Now, when one subject the scene seemed to get pretty up in arms about, because the first two subjects that we've talked about, granted, they weren't really heavily hit on. This one, however, though, was a sore spot. CWL Vegas, which we all knew this tournament was going to happen. However, there were a lot of opinions, like I said, being thrown around as to how the groups will be decided. In past, it's been due to things like pro point races, as well as other things. This year, instead of choosing the top 12 teams from champs, which is what the community was assuming would happen, it's actually going to come from the top 12 teams from CWL Stage 2. Now, along with this as well, to kind of keep in consideration for those who are watching at home, you must retain 3 players from your Stage 2 team, however, in order to possess a guaranteed pool spot in Vegas. So if a roster does not retain a majority of its, or if a team does not maintain a majority of its roster, it will be replaced by teams with the highest amount of combined CWL Pro points from the 2018 season until the top 12 spots are filled. That's a tongue twister. Apologies for that, but there's a lot of information to be brought out there. But first off, before we talk about the 3-player rule, what's your thoughts on the community outrage and the fact that Stage 2 was chosen over champs?
I think the outrage initially, everyone would have looked at it and said, oh, you're catering to Optic, which would have been a lot of people's first thoughts. However, I agree to a point. I think there's 2 different sides to the story. I think you could argue either way. I think champs is the most high pressure environment, so you could argue that would have been better. However, I think it was Adam Apicella who tweeted about it, saying the reason we chose to go off Pro League placements was because that was a 17-week sample of how these teams did, which is a very, very good argument to say why you would do it from that perspective. I think there's 2 different sides to it. I think if they'd done either way, I mean, to be honest with you, I was expecting them to do it from champs. I sort of heard that was what was going to happen. And then for them to do it that way, it actually, to me, makes more sense. I think that a one-off tournament to potentially judge how the rest of the year goes is difficult. Whereas if you take it from a bigger sample size, these teams have been at the top for quite some time. I think it works out better. I think you definitely would prefer to see, on an average, the better teams make it to these pools. And again, that's no guarantees of what happens. At the end of the day, some of these teams will be guaranteed, obviously, to go to the qualifier for Pro League. Some of them will make it to the top 4, of course. But I just wanted to touch on to the point of, I've completely lost it now, what I was going to talk about. Anyway, I think they probably made the best decision, to be honest with you, and I'm looking forward to see what happens.
Yeah, I think that after kind of seeing that tweet, it kind of legitimized everything. It was like, okay, like I get that. Like that makes total sense to me. The only thing that I would maybe argue is that I like the idea of teams from the prior stage not necessarily all having the same opportunity, because I feel like champs is that position, right, where non-pro league teams can potentially, if this format were to kind of go through. So you talk about your guys like Ghost Gaming, Team Vitality, who didn't make it to Stage 2 playoffs. I think it was Elevate who also topped that top 12 as well. Those teams, you could argue, right, that's their opportunity at champs to give themselves a spot for the next season. When that's the thing where, like you said, it's difficult to get into the regular stages. An opportunity like that at champs, to me, I feel like is cool. I think it's a crucial opportunity, but I get the bigger sample size. To me, that's more legitimate. That means more to me. And I will say the only thing that I can argue is that this format, I wish that maybe not everything is decided in the offseason, and that maybe a little bit more preparation is done so that the teams know heading into Stage 2, knowing heading into what will be just now Stage 1, the only stage, and then now heading into champs, which one means more heading into the next title. I feel like that discussion needs to happen more. I think that now is known and will probably happen. But I think kind of leaving pros in the dark a little bit to not know which tournament, which one that they perform better at or worse at, is going to define their career for the next season.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that you would expect that to be the marker there for next year as well. Whatever happens in the Pro League finals that they're now calling it, you would expect that to be the position where everybody ends up in the next year, whatever game it's going to be. I do remember my point I was going to make about the obviously you have to keep a hold of 3 players if you want to use that team from the Pro League, and then it drops into Pro points. So I don't think we're actually going to see as many teams sticking as that core 3 as you would have thought. Because to be honest with you, those players have got the pro points, haven't they? You know, if they all sort of amalgamate together, that's a spot gone. So you would like to think that there's a lot of teams going to be taking those spots. And then if not, these teams who are making the change from the three players that they had at Pro League, they would like to fancy their chances in that little last chance qualifier on the Thursday to get into pools. Worst comes to worst, if you have to go to Open and be one of the other teams that get through there, it's a grueling task. But again, teams will still fancy themselves if they are making these changes, because the thing is, they're making the changes for the better. That's what they think in their eyes. So they should be confident of getting themselves into pools either way, I would say. But I don't think it should be too much of a deterrent that you have to keep 3 players from the same team to automatically qualify. Even if you were top 12, of course. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of examples where this is probably going to happen. You would say, EG, FaZe, is that it? Red, of course, as well. And
Red Reserve. Well, that's like the only 100% confirmed team is Red Reserve after the pickup of Bance. But yeah, what? Like, there's a few rumored out there. Like, you already said FaZe, right?
Yeah, FaZe, yeah.
FaZe and EG.
Yeah. It looks like those are the 3 teams that are probably sticking together at this point.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the only 3 teams that it might affect. I mean, we could see 100 Thieves. Of course, they've got 2 players from stage 2 of that TK team. Even if they bring 1 in, if they bring Accuracy in, which would probably be the more likely pick over Enable, I would say, then they automatically get a spot. But were they even thinking about Accuracy? Who knows? Will they now think about him? Probably. But then at the same time, they'll have a lot of pro points going into the next spot, because there's going to be so many spots that aren't taken because there isn't going to be that many people with 3 players from last season.
Yeah, so we're basically saying, like, there probably will be 3, and that means there's 9 more spots available potentially. And of course, we're probably missing a team. There could be someone out there who it does end up sticking and kind of have that core 3 remain in the next season. But now we're along the same topic. We got to talk about the Pro League, obviously, right? This was a topic that I'm unsure of as of right now compared to all the other things. This is probably the most unsure of that I am for everything. The Pro League will now consist of a single stage, no longer 2. Now, there's positives to me and there's negatives to me for this. Now, this is my problem, Tunn. Relegation to me is more important and gives opportunities for teams outside the league. And that's the problem where I see with this, is that you can give an incentive, like you can give players cash per each match, of course, which was introduced as well. They're going to get money if they win a particular game in each match in the CWL stage. However, to me, you cannot at all even put in the same conversation how important the relegation is to stay out of that bottom 4 compared to getting money. Like, that is much more of an incentive to me to want to play better than money will ever be, because of the amount of money that's possible if I'm able to stay in that top 12 region. But I say I'm also worried about this being the end-all be-all, because if you don't qualify for this stage, depending on how well the Path to Pro or the amateur circuit is handled, Vegas and the qualifying event are it. Like, if you don't make it into these 2 tournaments or don't play well at these 2, the meta's different. Granted, you have a little bit more time, but if the meta isn't established in these first 2 tournaments, you're not maybe at your peak as of yet, you're kind of done until champs. And that's, to me, the only major dig that I could take at a lot of these formats is the factor of that. And granted, like, the stage 2 wasn't as exciting. I know from a viewership standpoint, that's my biggest, like, okay, like, I get that. But at the same time, I don't know. It's just a little bit, it makes me a little bit worried, I think. I don't know.
For me, the saving grace with this is that players roster changes can happen more often. That seems to be the case now. So, if you're performing at a good level in the amateur scene and players want to make changes and they want to get rid of somebody and there isn't just a roster mania, new players can come in from that off the back of good performances, you would like to think. I think that was their idea of a route in for these amateur players. And of course, let's talk about the subs as well. The players can automatically have subs. So if you are listed as a sub and somebody is going to get dropped, you're probably going to automatically be next in line to try and get into this team. So I think there's going to be more opportunities, not for teams to make it into this Pro League, as you obviously can't. There's only going to be one. And then there's more opportunity for players themselves on a solo basis to try and get in. So I think that's the saving grace on that point. I think I sort of liked it because I agree with you in the sense of that stage 2. When it got towards the end, I got a bit bored. I did. Of the games going on every single week. And it's sort of just, there was too many games.
And a lot of them were decided. Like, there were some points where it was like, okay, like, we know this team's not going to qualify. Mm-hmm. We're kind of saying like everything was kind of set in stone after a certain amount of weeks. Actually, World War II, you could argue stage 2 was very close, at least as certain divisions are considered. But yeah, it got to that point where, I mean, you obviously said it as well. started to get a little bit stale.
Yeah, it did. So I think it's good in that aspect. But yeah, I think I agree with you to a point of where what have these players got to play for, but then they have to play for possible spots on the pro league teams. But at the same time, obviously, we know the amateur scene is going to have money available. I know it's not the be all and end all, but I mean, realistically, that's why you want to be a professional Call of Duty player, is because you want to make your living playing Call of Duty. So this whole amateur scene having more prize pool to itself, that sort of thing, does offer that route in. So I think it solves a couple of problems, but creates some more itself. So I think it probably solves more problems than it creates, though, for me.
And I feel like, to me, one of the biggest problems, speaking along with that, is the prestige from stage 2 to stage 1, because that's no longer there for me. And when I discussed that, is that like stage 1 was important because it gave you an opportunity for stage 2. But if you're in stage 2, you play well, you're in champs. And those are the two biggest, you could argue, money opportunities for players were those particular two scenarios. So I feel like the prestige from one stage to another, because I used to see players tweet out, like, oh, I didn't make stage 1, but at least stage 2 is still there because of that, driving force, the champs that I have. That's no longer there, which I think is great. And like we already talked about, 2 stages in some cases could have got boring, probably would have in some cases, even though you could argue 5v5, etc. Sometimes the league matches don't mean as much. Now this one stage, all the focus is going to be on this. You got one time, one league, that's it. No second opportunities or anything along those lines. And to me, this could also be the introduction to franchising as far as a single season as well. Like, this could be like them preparing for that. This could be a preparation as far as like from a production side to see how it works, to see how everything kind of feels out. I'm excited for it. I'm not going to lie. The factor of having one stage from, to me, a viewer standpoint is fun. From a player standpoint, I mean, it makes things very, very intense, which you could argue is a good or bad thing.
Yeah, I think it does make things a lot more intense. And one of the things I really liked was the fact that they're going to have the finals as a big event. I did like that because I feel as if that's something that the Pro League was missing. But yeah, I think another aspect of that, of the amateur scene coming in, sorry, to move away from Pro League a little bit, was that I feel as if this is going to make Saturday broadcast a lot more enjoyable to watch, because as somebody who was there and casting, Saturday was my least favorite day, because Friday, it's crazy. You got all the pool player teams going against each other. Sunday, obviously, you got your finals, your later game stages. Saturday, it became such a slog because you'd be going through it, and it's literally pro team against team who comes out of open, and they're just getting railed. And maybe
if you're a commentator, it's like Saturday morning games. It's like, okay, like, all right, here we go. This is about to be like a 3-0, 3-0, maybe a 3-1. Like, and I actually did some stats really quick that I wanted to point out. I actually went through all of the open bracket performances at major lands throughout the World War II season. Overall series were 28-68. Now, this is obviously for open bracket teams. So they went 28-68 as far as open bracket making their way into pool play. Overall maps, they went 138-229. Overall open bracket teams that made it out of pools were 5 out of the 24. And then if you were to exclude CWL Seattle, which was absolutely absurd, where 3 teams actually made it out of the open bracket, only 2 for 20. So like, that just goes to show the dominance that the regular stage teams had versus the open bracket. And
you have to look at it from their point, from Activision, from MLG's, from the CWL's point. It is a deterrent to people watching on Saturday. I'm the same as a caster. And I was somebody who was employed by them, and at the same time, I hope that doesn't get me into trouble, but that's the reason they've done it, is because it was a little bit boring to watch. The same teams get railed every single month when we come around to these events. And yeah, okay, there was a couple of Cinderella stories where teams got out, and that is always interesting to watch, but it doesn't happen.
How often does that happen?
Yeah, exactly. So I think they've done the right thing here. I think it becomes a lot more interesting where you've got these top teams in pools. They're going to be good games all the way through. I think it's the right decision to make.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it obviously works out. But, buddy, I think that's all the time that we have. Of course, you guys can follow Tunn on Twitter @CTun_ or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Tunny. Always a pleasure to talk with you, buddy.